Have you ever found yourself standing at someone's doorstep, smiling, holding a little something in hand, expecting a warm hug, only to leave with a feeling you just can't shake? Maybe you sensed that your visit wasn't as welcome as you hoped. Maybe the conversation felt forced, or the goodbye came a little too soon. And now you're wondering if you crossed an invisible line. It happens more often than we care to admit, especially as we get older. Our lives shift. Our routines change. And what once felt perfectly natural, like stopping by a friend's or relative's house on a whim, starts to carry a different weight. That's not because people stop caring. It's because, over time, everyone's energy, priorities, and comfort zones evolve. And if we're not careful, even our kindest intentions can land the wrong way. That's why today, we're going to have a gentle but honest conversation. One that's not about judgment or pulling away from the people we love, but about how we can nurture our relationships with more awareness, more respect, and more grace. After all, the goal isn't just to be present. It's to be present in a way that brings warmth, not weight. That lifts, not lingers. So let's talk about a few kinds of people you might want to think twice about visiting, at least not without checking in first. Because sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is give space. Let's start with the people you've known the longest, your close friends, the ones you've been through everything with, the weddings, the losses, the birthday calls that never fail. You may have decades of shared memories, a kind of closeness that doesn't need words. But even that kind of bond needs breathing room. Think of Susan and Linda, two best friends for over 30 years. They'd laughed together at midnight over silly movies, cried together through heartbreak, stood side by side at each other's milestones. So one afternoon, Susan figured she'd just pop by Linda's place with some fresh muffins she'd baked. No need to call ahead. It was Linda. Surely she wouldn't mind. But Linda wasn't expecting company that day. In fact, she'd been deep in a project she was behind on and hadn't showered or eaten yet. She opened the door with a surprised smile, welcomed Susan in. Of course she did, she loved her. But the air felt off. Susan picked up on it too. The conversation felt stilted. Linda seemed distracted. And after 20 minutes, they both breathed a quiet sigh of relief when the visit wrapped up. Susan walked home wondering, did I do something wrong? And Linda sat down feeling a little guilty for not being more available. Neither of them meant to hurt the other, but the timing just wasn't right. That's why, even with our oldest friends, a simple call or message beforehand can make all the difference. It doesn't take away from the closeness. In fact, it honors it. It says, I care enough to make sure you're in the right space to enjoy our time together. That one small step removes pressure, avoids awkwardness, and gives both people the chance to fully show up. Because here's something we don't talk about enough. As we get older, peace becomes more precious. Our energy isn't endless. Our days may be fuller than they appear from the outside, with responsibilities, health routines, even quiet moments we rely on to feel whole. And when someone shows up unexpectedly, even with good intentions, it can feel like an emotional interruption rather than a joyful surprise. It's not personal. It's human. Respecting that space doesn't mean pulling away. It means giving your friendships room to breathe so they can grow stronger, not strained. Susan and Linda figured that out. Now they meet every other week at their favorite cafe. Neutral ground. No pressure. Just coffee, stories, and laughter that comes easily, because they're both fully present, prepared, and at ease. This kind of respect isn't a sign of distance. It's a sign of deep care, of knowing that time, energy, and mental space are gifts, not to be assumed but to be invited. The same principle applies even more tenderly when it comes to visiting family. Especially if you're recently retired or entering a chapter of life where your days are more open than they used to be, it's natural to want to reconnect. To drop by your cousin's house for a chat. to bring your daughter a surprise meal, to pop in on your brother just to say hi. And yes, family should be the safest space for that kind of closeness. But the truth is, even family needs space. Take Frank, a 63-year-old man who had recently retired after decades of hard work. With his workdays behind him, he suddenly had hours to fill and a growing desire to reconnect with the people he'd missed while life was moving fast. So one sunny afternoon, he drove over to visit George, an old friend and former colleague. He brought cookies, no warning, just knocked on the door with a hopeful smile. George and his wife answered with warmth, but also a little surprise. They weren't expecting company. Their home had become a quiet refuge, a slower place since retirement. The conversation was polite but awkward. The laughter didn't come easily. Frank felt like he was pulling words from thin air, and George looked like he was trying hard to be present, but couldn't quite get there. Later that night, Frank admitted to himself that something felt off. He hadn't been rejected. But he also hadn't been received the way he imagined. And that's when it hit him. His desire for connection, while valid, had collided with someone else's desire for stillness. It's a tough realization, because it goes against what we've been taught about family and closeness. We've always believed that the more we show up, the stronger the bond. But in reality, showing up isn't just about being physically present. It's about being emotionally tuned in. Sometimes love means stepping back. It means trusting that you're still important, even if you're not together all the time. It means sending a text instead of knocking on the door. It means planning a lunch date instead of assuming someone's calendar is open. It's not about distance. It's about dignity, yours and theirs. So if you've ever found yourself wondering whether to stop by unannounced, pause. Think about the rhythm of that person's life. Think about how you'd feel if someone knocked on your door at the wrong moment. Not angry, just unready. You see, love matures. And as it matures, it asks for more than good intentions. It asks for understanding. Understanding that everyone, no matter how close, has an inner world you can't always see. A world of needs, emotions, routines, and rest. And if we want to remain a welcome part of that world, we have to knock, not barge in. Now that we've explored how even close friends and family deserve that space, let's continue by looking at one of the most common and often overlooked types of visits that can turn problematic, especially when it involves the people we've grown up with. When it comes to relationships that go all the way back to childhood, our siblings, it can be even harder to notice when boundaries begin to shift. You may have grown up sharing bedrooms, holidays, even heartaches. And for much of life, your brothers and sisters felt like a built-in support system. No matter what happened in the world outside, you always had each other. But here's the part no one prepares us for. Even those bonds change. Not necessarily for the worse, just differently. As adults, we each carve out our own lives, our own routines, our own pace. We marry. We move. We take on new responsibilities. And the people who once sat across the dinner table every night can suddenly feel like distant planets, orbiting their own rhythms, balancing their own weight. Now imagine showing up at your sister's house on a quiet Tuesday afternoon, thinking she'd be thrilled to see you. And maybe she is in her heart, but her face doesn't quite light up the way you expected. Her voice sounds distracted. Her hugs are polite, but they don't linger. You start to wonder, did I do something wrong? The answer, more often than not, is no. But you might have done something uninvited. Let me tell you about the Andersons. 5 siblings, all over the age of 50. Growing up, they were the very picture of closeness. Their family home was full of energy, Sunday dinners, birthday blowouts, and late-night talks that stretched long after dessert. Their parents were the glue that held it all together. The kind of family you look at and think, they've got something special. But then the years passed. One by one, they moved out, had children of their own. Careers grew, health became a factor, and eventually, as it always does, the center of gravity, Mom and Dad, was no longer there. The house they once gathered in became just a memory. The Sunday dinners faded. Holidays became quieter. At first, everyone promised to keep the tradition going, but tradition has a way of slipping when life gets heavy. One afternoon, a longtime friend asked Greg, the oldest of the Anderson siblings, why the family didn't get together like they used to. Greg, once the heart of every gathering, gave a reply that landed like a stone. We only did all that because our parents were there. Without them, it just doesn't make sense anymore. It wasn't said with anger, just clarity. A kind of honesty that can sting but also free you. Because what Greg expressed, though it might seem cold, was something many families feel but never say aloud. Sometimes, togetherness was held up by a structure that no longer exists. And once it's gone, what remains isn't obligation. It's choice. And sometimes, that choice is space. Showing up at a sibling's home unannounced, especially as we get older, can put pressure where there once was ease. It's not that they don't love you, but maybe their day was already packed. Maybe they were hoping for a moment of rest. Maybe, just maybe, they're carrying something emotionally heavy and weren't ready to share it over a cup of coffee. As adults, we carry quiet burdens, financial stress, caretaking duties, marital tensions, health concerns. We haven't found the words for yet. And even the closest sibling might not know what their brother or sister is holding in that moment. This is why, especially now, we must replace assumption with invitation. Reaching out first, even briefly, changes the entire energy. It gives your sibling the chance to say, "Yes, I'd love to see you," or "Can we do another day?" without guilt or pressure. That kind of grace, giving others room to choose, is the foundation of mature, lasting love. Just like a garden needs sunlight and water, relationships need both closeness and space. Too much of either and the roots can weaken. The key is balance. And here's the truth. Just because your visits become less frequent doesn't mean the love fades. Quite the opposite. When we start visiting each other with more intention and less obligation, each meeting becomes more meaningful. It's no longer just dropping by. It becomes something both people look forward to. A real moment of connection, not just a habit. That's a powerful shift. One that honors your history together, but also respects who each of you has become. Now, let's turn to a type of visit that's perhaps the most misunderstood and the most delicate. I'm talking about visiting someone who keeps an exceptionally neat, tidy, and structured home. At first, it seems harmless. You knock on the door, maybe with a cheerful smile and a treat to share. But behind that door may be someone who treasures their space as more than just a place to live. For them, it's a sanctuary, a reflection of their mind, their peace, their way of staying grounded in a world that often feels unpredictable. Let me introduce you to Edward, a quiet man in his 70s who spent decades in the military. His life was one of routine, order, and precision. When he retired, his home became his safe space, a carefully kept environment where everything had its place, and peace came not from noise, but from stillness. One day, his cousin Emily dropped by unexpectedly. She needed a quick favor, nothing big. But she was in a rush, flustered, and when she entered Edward's living room, she didn't quite notice the way he subtly tensed. She headed to the bathroom, knocked over a small bottle, and brushed it off with a laugh. "Oops, I'm always clumsy," she said casually. But for Edward, it wasn't just a spilled bottle. It was a ripple in the calm waters he'd worked so hard to maintain. His home wasn't just tidy, it was his retreat, his place to recharge. That small disruption, however minor, felt like an invasion, not of property, but of emotional stability. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold her. but something shifted that day. And when she asked for help, he hesitated, not out of selfishness, but out of a quiet need to protect his boundaries. To some, that might sound dramatic. But to many of us, especially in later years, our homes become sacred. Not in a showy way, but in a deep, personal way. They are the places where we feel safe from the world's demands, where we control what comes in and out. And when someone steps into that space without invitation or understanding, it can be more jarring than they realize. You see, Emily didn't mean harm, but she didn't recognize how much Edward's peace depended on feeling secure in his space. And sometimes that's the greatest kindness we can offer someone, to acknowledge that their home is an extension of their soul, and to approach it with reverence. Visiting isn't just about being welcomed in. It's about honoring the person's emotional world before you even cross the threshold. What we often forget, especially as we get older, is that visiting someone's home is never just about entering a space. It's about entering someone's inner world. And for people like Edward, or anyone who finds peace in a clean, calm environment, that world has been carefully built, often as a shield against the unpredictability of life outside. This becomes more true the older we get. Our homes stop being just functional spaces. They become extensions of us. The lighting, the quiet, the familiar routines, they all form a rhythm that helps us feel safe and steady. And when someone disrupts that rhythm, even unintentionally, it can feel like more than just a knock at the door. It can feel like a wave crashing into still water. That's why respecting someone's home is more than just wiping your shoes or using a coaster. It's about pausing to consider how your presence might affect their peace. Are you showing up with calm and care? Or are you bringing the noise of the outside world into a space where it doesn't belong? Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is ask first. Send a message. Make a call. And if the answer isn't an immediate yes, honor that. Because real respect isn't about insisting on connection. It's about waiting for the right moment. It's about giving others the dignity of their own time, their own schedule, their own way of welcoming you. That dignity goes both ways. When we respect others' boundaries, we give them permission to respect ours in return. And in doing so, we shift the focus from duty to choice, from obligation to joy. Think about your own home for a moment. How do you feel when someone shows up unannounced, even someone you love? You might smile, offer tea, try your best to make them feel welcome. But deep down, maybe you were in the middle of something. Maybe you weren't in the headspace to talk. Maybe you needed that time to be still, to rest, to just breathe. And yet, we rarely extend that same sensitivity to others. We assume our visit will be a delight, that we're bringing warmth, not weight. But the truth is, timing matters. Intentions matter. Awareness matters. You're not being cold by giving people space. You're being wise. You're not drifting apart by checking in before you visit. You're drawing closer because you're showing that their needs matter to you. And you're not selfish for guarding your own peace. You're simply learning how to live with intention, with softness, with grace. We often carry this old belief that love is proven through presence. That if you really care about someone, you should always be available, always be visiting, always be popping in to check up. But love doesn't need to be loud to be real. It doesn't need to be constant to be strong. Love, at this stage of life, is quieter, more respectful. It knows when to lean in and when to step back. And if you've found yourself wrestling with guilt, wondering if you should visit more, call more, show up more, take a deep breath. You are allowed to protect your energy. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to wait until your heart is full before you pour into someone else's cup. And the same goes for them. It's not distance that weakens bonds, it's disregard. And on the flip side, it's not closeness that strengthens them. It's consent. When both people feel seen, respected, and heard, that's when connection truly flourishes. So if there's one message I hope you take with you, it's this. You don't have to knock on every door to prove you care. You don't have to be present in everyone's home to be present in their heart. A text, a thoughtful card, a shared laugh over the phone, these are all acts of love, just as valid as a visit. And when you do visit, make it intentional. Make it warm. Make it wanted. Because the most beautiful moments happen not when we arrive unannounced, but when we are truly welcomed. When both hearts are open, when both spirits are ready, and when the space between us feels like a choice, not a chore. Before we end, I'd love to hear from you. Has there ever been a moment when a visit didn't go the way you hoped? Or maybe a time when giving someone space actually made your relationship stronger? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Your stories mean more than you know, and they just might help someone else who's going through the same thing. And if this message spoke to you, if it made you pause, reflect, or feel a little lighter, I'd be so grateful if you could take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. That one click helps me keep sharing these gentle, honest conversations with more people who need them. You've come this far in the video, and that tells me something. You care deeply about your relationships. You want to show up with wisdom, not just routine, and that's something to be proud of. So, here's to you. To the way you've learned to love more thoughtfully. To the courage it takes to give space instead of seeking control. To the peace that comes with knowing your presence is not just seen, but truly welcomed. You've earned that peace, and you deserve to protect it. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Until next time, be kind to yourself. Cherish your quiet moments, and never underestimate the power of thoughtful presence. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.